Hey, welcome to the 12th episode of SteeleWatching. This episode is Steele Flying High, and I am Eric, one of your hosts.
And I am Sara, the other one of the hosts.
And before we get started getting into the actual episode, there's a couple things that we need to address. First of all, I was editing the Steel Trap episode the other day, and you remember, Sara, that during that, we had this conversation about weird food combinations.
Oh, yeah.
And specifically, you mentioned your husband's tendency to put ketchup on waffles.
No, on French toast.
It's French, French toast. I'm sorry.
French toast.
Okay. Well, I was listening to that as I was editing it, and it was like, man, I feel sorry for this guy.
Crime against food.
Well, I feel sorry. It is, but I feel sorry for him being let out there on his own with nobody else to feel his pain. So I thought I would make my own somewhat weird food confession and now. Well, it's not quite as bad as ketchup on French toast.
Okay.
Ever since I've been a kid, I have liked fried salmon patties accompanied by mashed potatoes with creamed corn on the potatoes. Now, it actually works pretty well. It's a nice flavor combination. And I do know people mix whole kernel corn sometimes into their potatoes, but I get a lot of weird looks when I put creamed corn on mashed potatoes. So
it's a little strange. It's not quite ketchup on French toast strange, but a little strange. I can see if you think about something like shepherd's pie, though.
Mm-hmm. It is, yes.
It's not as or scalloped potatoes have a lot of cream in them, so it's not as weird, I would say. Although we used to play when I was a kid, we made up this game. My siblings and we made up this game called Super Gross Me Out. It's our very creative title for the game. And the purpose of the game was because there was 4 of us, and then I have a half brother and half sister, so 6 of us in total. And my half brother, whenever he was over, would play would play this game because they didn't live with us. And essentially, the point of the game was to come up with 3 foods together. It had to be a food. It couldn't be anything like poop or something that wasn't edible. It had to be a food, but just to come up with the grossest food combinations, 3 foods that you would put together. And then there would be we'd take turns having a judge, and whoever the judge was, every one of the rest of us would all come up with our 3. And then that person would be like, okay, no, Sarah had the worst one, or Chris had the worst one, or whatever. And so we came up with some pretty, bananas with chili pepper sauce and I don't know, just the worst foods you can imagine. And that just made me think of it coming up with cream corn and mashed potatoes with salmon patty. Those are 3. Yeah. Those are 3 foods. Could have entered that into the super.
Well, I just wanted to show a little bit of solidarity with your husband. That's
I'll
all.
let him know. I'll make sure he listens to this episode.
All right. And then before we get started, again, there's one more thing to deal with, actually a 2-part one more thing. And the first one is we have a forum called Steele in the Spotlight. And
Yay.
Sara, since that was really your inspiration, I'm going to let you talk about it.
Oh, good. Completely unprepared. This should no.
Sure.
Essentially,
improvisational skills come in handy.
Yes, and we had this idea of, because the SteeleWatching community is so interactive, and we go back a ways, and some of us a long ways, and I thought it would be a cool idea to highlight some of the Steele Watchers who have helped make the community what it is. And we came up with the idea of a form that you can fill out voluntarily. It's obviously not required. No one's gonna come to your house and be like, you must fill out this form. But yeah, if you want to be mentioned on the podcast, you fill out the form, send it to us, and we'll, obviously you include whatever you want us to mention and not anything you don't. And am I missing anything?
No, that's pretty much covers it.
We'd just love to shout out to everybody that's been in the community.
Yeah, and that's really I kind of created a problem in doing that because I wanted to give shout outs to some folks who'd left some positive comments about the podcast in the Steele Watchers group. And apparently there were some issues as a result of that. Some people were put into maybe a position they hadn't intended to be in, which was not at all what my intention was. I just wanted to give them a shout out. And so Sarah's idea here was to use this form as an alternative means of letting people get the shout out for listening, to submit a comment about the podcast that we can then share with others. So that was...
Yeah. And
I created the problem. You created the solution.
Teamwork makes the dream work. That's what my daughter likes to say.
Well, and then the next form is we've entitled Steele Telling Stories.
Mm-hmm.
We have an idea. I was going to say it's not fully formed, but it's not even formed enough to be...
It's germinating.
Partially formed. It's just a grain of an idea.
It's like penicillin. I don't know where that came
from. But what we want to try to do is figure out some way to incorporate fan fiction into the podcast or something. We want to do something with fan fiction. And so what we would like people to do is, and we're going to have links to these two forms in the show notes on the website. So you can just go there and find them and go to them. You don't have to do any fancy typing. But the idea is to collect names of favorite fan fiction authors and favorite fan fiction stories from Steele fans. Now, the form has two different sections. The first one is for everybody to fill out. And then the second part is for those who are actually fan fiction authors. So if you're a fan fiction author, in that first top section, please just be a fan of fan fiction. Don't be an author. And then in the bottom section, designed for the authors, that's where you get to blow your own horn, so to speak. So you're going to blow somebody else's horn and then blow your own. And like I said, we really don't know yet at this point.
Speaking of euphemisms.
Okay. All right. Let's don't
You're
go
fired.
there. Let's don't go there. But now I lost my place. Where was I? Oh, yes. We still really don't know how we're going to do this yet. And certainly once we get to the point where we're doing it, we are going to have the authors involved. And we're not just going to abscond with their stories and put them out there against their will in a way that they don't necessarily want them done. So we're planning on being respectful in how we approach it. We just don't know how we want to approach it yet. So in the meantime, yeah, we're just gathering names of stories and authors that are your favorites so that we've got this file on hand ready to go when we decide how we want to incorporate fan fiction into our podcast. So there we go. All the stuff that has nothing to do with the episode is done.
Is it? Are we
Yes,
sure?
I think so.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure. That's all that I've got listed here. So,
all right, cool.
All right, so let's get into the episode.
All righty.
The episode Steele Flying High was first aired on January 14th, 1983. It was written by Richard Collins and directed by Nick Havings. Now, I went to Judith Moose's book, Steele Loved After All These Years, to get the episode synopsis, and I went with the TV Guide one. It has, I think, an issue. It's a small issue. I'll mention it when I'm done reading it. But I think it was probably the best, most succinct of the choices there. So here we go. Steele wonders why he's being asked to join a committee to save the bald eagle. Then he learns about the murder of a member who supposedly sent him a controversial report of the land proposed as a sanctuary. Okay, so my issue with that is that it kind of suggests that he was brought onto the committee because of the murder, when in fact, it was just because of the report.
True.
Everybody wanted the report, and somebody got killed in the process.
And of course, Grace thought he had it, so the easiest way to find that out was to get him on the committee.
Right.
But yeah,
exactly.
It does kind of mislead a little bit.
Just a little bit. Okay, so 1 point off for the TV Guide synopsis writers.
Well, at least, I mean,
You've been doing so well, people.
Yeah, they didn't have their thesaurus out this time, so
they lost the plot.
Yeah.
So the opening, as with In the Steele of the Night, this opening is somewhat out of the ordinary for Remington Steele and is more along the Columbo-inspired opening that we also saw in The Steele of the Night, where we actually see part of the crime occur.
Yep.
In this case, we see a man being drowned. And I got to ask, is the criminal dumb?
I think we had similar notes.
I mean, you're looking for something.
Yep.
You know that this person has it or probably has it or knows where it's at. So let's go ahead and kill them first and then start looking for it.
And then take him back home. Like,
yes.
I'm getting ahead of myself here, but they find the pond water in his lungs. So, like, they had to have known that eventually that would lead back to, like, if it were me, and I'm not saying that I'm outlining my plans to commit murder here, but I would have. I just want to make that very clear.
Okay, well, just remember, everybody, this is all being recorded. It's going to be out there on the internet for the world to see. So if Sara is ever investigated for a murder, we have the confession right here.
True. But I would have waited and dumped the body in the lake.
Yeah, just left it there.
Just left it there. Like, it seems very odd to take it back and then put it in the tub and be like, yeah, it was totally an accident. He definitely drowned. Okay.
Well, I can see removing the body from the lake in the respect that the guy's trying to sell some land. And you probably don't want that sale process damaged, interfered with, deterred by somebody finding a body in the middle of the property.
Yeah, that's
But yeah, I mean, if you're going to do that, you got to take certain things into account. One being that scientists, forensic scientists, whatever they are, that does the water analysis, they can tell.
Oh, yeah.
They can tell what kind of water the person was drowned in.
Yeah, even in the 80s.
So, dumb criminal.
Yeah, very. Well, he is a politician, so they're not known for being.
But we don't know that yet.
No, that's true. I'm just saying. Spoilers. Sorry.
Okay, so Dumb Criminals Part 2.
Yeah.
Or I'm going to call this Dumb Criminals Part 2. We see Grace Stanton driving up the road at night. She comes into a residential area and blocks from the house. She turns off her headlights.
My notes exactly. So dangerous.
Well, yes, it is dangerous. And I wish there was a bunch of people out there that would just use their brains, because every day I see so many people driving around without their headlights on. Like
right?
It's cool or something. I don't know. But more to the point here, if you're going to be breaking into somebody's house, you probably don't want to attract attention to yourself. And what's the best way to not attract attention to yourself? You just act normally.
Yeah, you pull into the driveway.
Yeah. Is it normal to turn off your headlights 2 blocks before you get home? It's not.
Nope. No.
If somebody's driving down the road with headlights out through a neighborhood and then they pull in somebody's driveway, that's probably going to attract somebody's attention.
Yep.
And then she goes up to the porch and she's looking around, making sure nobody's watching her. Again, red flag. You're getting people's attention by not acting normally. Just walk up to the door, make like you're trying to open it. Oh, I forgot my key. I'll get the emergency key out of the flower pot. I'll open the door. Just act normal. It's the acting not normal that gets people's attention.
Absolutely.
Dumb.
It is. And I actually have, my notes are almost identical up to me saying, like, she knows this person because she grabs the key. So why pretend, like, why be all, if I were a neighbor and I'm watching this car come up without its headlights and then somebody's furtively glancing around and then they're, going into the flower, like, I would be suspicious of that, but I wouldn't be suspicious if a car just drove up, parked in the driveway, got out, and the person, like, confidently walks up to the door, tries to open it, oops, forgot my key, and grabs it out of the flower pot. I would just be like, oh, that's a neighbor, that's a friend, that's somebody who knows this person. So yeah, I agree. Dumb criminal number 2.
And then the inconsistency of, okay, I've turned off my headlights so nobody will see me. I've looked around while I'm getting the key out of the flower pot to make sure nobody sees me. And then I'm going to walk into the house and I'm going to turn on the lights.
All the lights. Yep. Because of course, a flashlight, if you're trying to be all stealthy, you don't turn on the lights. You bring a flashlight with you and then you only use it when necessary.
Yeah. So there's a lot of inconsistency in her criminal activity, behavior, mentality, whatever. I mean, she's not a very smart crook. That's for sure.
No,
Granted, she's not a professional crook, but I mean, come on, a little common sense here, people. So, okay, she's in the house looking around, finds the desk calendar, and calls the phone number, which is the Remington Steele offices. Question.
I probably have the same one.
It's dark outside.
Yep.
It's Los Angeles. Twilight on I think it was the longest day of the year in Los Angeles. Twilight is around 6:30.
Yep.
So, no, I'm sorry. Yeah. On the shortest day of the year, it's around 6:30, which means that on the longer days of the year, it's even later than that.
Yeah.
And yet Bernice was there answering the phone.
Yep.
Have they recovered from the Christmas slowdown?
I guess so, because my exact comment here was, what time is it? It's pitch black outside. Wouldn't they have gone home for the night? So, yeah, I had the exact same note, because I assumed when she saw Remington Steele's number that there would be a fade, because I haven't watched this episode in a while. I assumed there'd be a fade, and then we'd see like the daylight exterior shot, and then they'd be getting a call indicating that she waited until the next day. But no, she calls them right then and there, and I'm like, why is Bernice still there? It's dark. Go home.
Yes. Yeah. They must have been putting in a lot of overtime on a case, but yet they don't seem to be all that busy.
They never do, unless it's meant for comedic effect, where Steele is, herding clients into a room and then leaving them there. Because, I also had, so I get that this is the guy, that this is Maxwell's house, and obviously he's on this committee, and so he's very into birds. All the taxidermied birds, though, in that house, that is the creepiest thing on the planet. I don't know how somebody would live with all those eyes looking at, like, he's a regular at whatever taxidermy store is near him. Like, he comes through that door and they're going, oh, yep, we've got another bird. Ew, creepy.
Well, either that or he just goes out and finds a bunch of taxidermy that's already been done and buys it and hangs it.
Maybe. That's true.
Could be. Either one.
Have I mentioned the taxidermy place near me, speaking of food?
No.
I know this was a weird segue, but I'm going somewhere with it. So this was mentioned, actually.
Hang on, people. It's going to be a bumpy ride.
Yeah. This store, that it's near me, it's like 20 minutes down the road, was mentioned either on Jimmy Kimmel or Jimmy Fallon. One of the Jimmys. I can never keep them straight, but it was mentioned as like weird stores that have weird businesses. And 20 minutes down the road is the Mapleton Taxidermy and Cheese Store. So they will stuff whatever animals you need stuffing. And their cheese curds are actually really delicious. And I know because we've gone and purchased them. So maybe he went to the Mapleton Taxidermy and Cheese Store. Who knows?
Okay. Well, then we see Laura on the phone agreeing to have Steele be the honorary chairman for the committee to save the bald eagle. And then later, Laura is upset that he's going to be late and says, "You gave your word."
Yeah.
Well, wait a minute. When did he give his word? She was the one who committed him to it.
She gave his word.
Yes. So, yeah, I was wondering about that. I wonder if there was a scene missing or something.
I wondered that too, because she seemed awfully pleased with herself on the phone, right? Almost like she was pulling one over on him, because she knows it's kind of like how he does things intentionally to torment her, and this felt the opposite way, like, haha, he's gonna hate this. Yeah. And then like there's something in the middle. It felt like there should be something in the middle, because as you said, then they're outside his bedroom door and she's telling him he gave his word, and well, I'm not sure. It's not quite how it went down, but okay.
Yeah. And then, Harris, after Steele kind of protests and gripes and grouses, she says, everyone knows that Remington Steele's word is his bond, which is a really nice throwback to Tempered Steele, where she says, tell old Meech that the press of other commitments forces you to turn Dillon Electronics over to Murphy and me. And he says, I gave him my word. And everyone knows that Remington Steele's word is his bond. So that was a nice throwback. And I looked to see. Him. Yeah, and it was not written by the same people. So Somebody picked up on that real well from somebody else's script. I like that.
I also like him pointing out the irony of the blue-haired women prattling on about the bald eagle while wearing chinchilla fur coats and alligator shoes, which was amusing to me because those were very fashionable at the time. I remember my grandmother, I think, I don't know if it was chinchilla, but she definitely had a fur coat. So that I found kind of funny.
What about the committee meeting?
Well, but before we get that, I did have one question. Was that... as I said, like, it seems in that previous scene that she just kind of wants to torment him a little bit by making him do something boring. I wonder, is it really going to help the agency having him be the honorary chairman of something that probably nobody's paying any attention to? It would make sense to have him, say, receive an honorary doctorate or an honorary degree from, a university, or make headlines maybe attending a sporting event or something like that. But the committee to save the bald eagle doesn't really grab headlines, I feel like.
No, it really doesn't. And it's probably not anything that, as you said, most people would notice. But it does look good on paper, I guess. Oh, you're being altruistic. You're donating your time and your reputation to promote this cause. And maybe the fact that it isn't a high-profile cause can be one of the things that they use because, see, he didn't just go out and promote some big organization that everybody knows about. He's out there helping the small organizations. So I can see how it would be a PR thing. I agree. I don't think it's a really good PR thing. No. I don't think it's going to ultimately be that beneficial for the agency. I think I would rather go with your earlier
She's trying to
idea
torment
that
him.
it's just as a way to, just to kind of stick it to him.
Which is kind of fun, I think, because then it shows that she's got a sense of, she's playing the game. She's not just being, the victim of the game. She's giving as good as she gets. And in this case, the poor guy, I don't like birds, especially bold ones.
What about that committee meeting where he meets Grace Stanton and all that stuff? He tries to give this really bad speech and it's terrible.
It is a bad, and the bit about all these women having twitches and then her comment about, well, you haven't seen their husbands is pretty good.
Yeah.
And I would say too, she calls him renowned but somewhat elusive, which is funny because he's not really that elusive anymore. It might have been more true in the premiere episode when he wasn't really being seen by anybody, but he's kind of all over the place now. So, but yeah, his speech, words fail me when it comes to the bald eagle.
Yeah.
It's good.
Well, and of course, part of that is because he hasn't bothered to read the book
thought
anything about it.
He did read some of it, whether it's here or later.
Yeah, I don't think it was at this point.
Okay.
Perhaps he had started reading it, but certainly not as much as he had later on. Because
he wasn't cover to cover.
Yeah, and he certainly didn't plan a speech, that's for sure.
No.
It's interesting. He says he ponders the arcane reasons that could have driven your founding fathers to select something as, well, you can see words fail me.
Yeah.
And I did do a real quick search on the bald eagle as the symbol of the United States. And just a quick little jaunt down a rabbit trail here. Shortly after the Declaration of Independence was signed on July 4th, 1776, the Continental Congress gave Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, and John Adams the job of designing an official seal for the country. But they failed.
Oh.
They submitted them and nobody liked them. So in 1782, the work that they had done had been handed over to somebody named Charles Thomson, who was the Secretary of Congress. And he chose what he thought were the best elements of the three designs and then made the eagle, which had been introduced artistically by a Pennsylvania lawyer named William Barton into the design. And he submitted that. And so Thomson made the eagle more prominent than it had been in the Barton design. And apparently, since ancient times, the eagle has been considered a symbol of strength, and Roman legions used it as their standard or their symbol.
Yeah, that's true, actually.
And contrary to legend, there is no evidence that Benjamin Franklin protested to Congress about the choice of the bald eagle and lobbied for the turkey, which is a popular notion. Apparently, though, that myth was based on a January 26, 1784 letter, which he wrote to his daughter, Sara. And in that letter, he panned the eagle and extolled the virtues of the turkey, although he didn't actually advocate for it to be the symbol of the country. He said that the bald eagle was a rank coward, a bird of bad moral character, and does not get his living honestly because he steals food and is too lazy to fish for himself. So, yeah,
Okay.
he believed that the turkey was a bird of courage that would not hesitate to attack a grenadier of the British Guards who should presume to invade the farmyard with a red coat on.
Ooh.
So, yeah.
Okay, so here's a question for you. Since we've gone down this rabbit hole, we're going to commit. Okay.
Okay.
Do you know what the official animals are for Canada and for Scotland?
For Scotland, is it haggis?
No, but it is equally.
I know that's not an animal.
It
that's
is
a food
equally
dish.
ridiculous. So it's actually not not that far off. I guess.
I don't know. Sheep, cow
No.
of some sort.
Okay, so Scotland has a unicorn. The official, I'm not kidding. The official animal, your face is priceless right now. The official animal for Scotland is the unicorn.
Do they realize it's not a real thing?
I don't think so. I think they were drunk when they were handing out official animals. It's the Scottish, so I'm just spitballing here. That it was like, okay, we get to pick one. I want the unicorn. That's my Scottish accent. It's really bad, but that's the best I can do. And for Canada, our official animal. Do you know what ours is? It's not as cool as a unicorn.
No clue. No clue.
Our official animal is the beaver. Yeah. So you guys got this cool bird that has like this majestic look to it, big wingspan. We got a little water rodent that bats its tail when danger is nearby. And the Scottish got a unicorn. So when it comes to having issues with official animals, I think the eagle is the least of your worries here. Could be worse.
Well, speaking of the beaver in Canada, the beaver is also the official state animal of the state of Oregon.
Huh.
And
interesting.
I don't know if you remember the Real Men of Genius commercials.
Vaguely. That sounds familiar, for sure.
I believe it was for a beer, if I'm not mistaken. And the vocalist was actually, and this is all off the top of my head because I didn't even go down this during
we did not expect to be talking about
during my research. Yeah. So I'm trying to remember this. The singer on those commercials was actually a singer of some big name rock band that was hugely popular in that period of time. And the commercials were so successful that not only did the company that was behind them order more for their product, which, like I said, I think it was a beer product, but these guys went out on tour and they did a show in Oregon and they made reference to the state animal.
Yeah. Okay.
And
where this is going.
I will see if I can find the lyrics or a link to the video and put it in the show notes. It has some euphemistic qualities to it.
Art, like I said, I am wearing, you can't see it right now, but the sweater that I'm wearing is my Beaver Canoe sweater. And it is official Roots merchandise from, a Canadian retail. Like, this is a thing. Like, we were built on the fur trade, hence why it actually it makes sense that our animal is a beaver. Like,
sure.
the country was built on that beaver fur trade. But like, just to say, like, we have the bald eagle, and the Canadians are like, we've got the beaver.
Yes, complete with all the
all the jokes. The jokes.
Oh, yes.
Could have had a unicorn and we didn't get
not safe for work.
Hey, the Welsh have a dragon, okay? So we're like, I know a lot about official. Yeah. You want to talk about the countries that drink a lot pick the fantasy animals. I don't think it's a coincidence. I'm just pointing that out.
Okay, let's get back into this.
Yeah, we should probably talk about the episode.
Oh.
Anyway.
So, okay, after during that committee meeting, he meets Grace Stanton, and I think he's somewhat pleased that she is not a blue-haired, twitchy old lady.
Yeah.
And then they hop up into the limo and they're going somewhere, and Is he totally oblivious to the fact that she's been pumping him for information?
He's an idiot. I have this actually in my notes. She immediately starts questioning Steele about whether he was sent this report. Steele has no idea what she's talking about. And then she basically, like, his reaction to her, we see in the episode before, in the previous episode, that he's a bit of a soft touch when it comes to people that he perceives to be vulnerable. He shows a tendency to be protective of others, especially if they're in trouble or being taken advantage of. But it's still pretty obvious. She's feeding him a line. And he's super gullible for not seeing it.
Yeah. And they just left Congressman Bishop, who was trying to pump him for information. So, I mean, you've got the one doing it and then turns right around, somebody else does it. Is he really that clueless, or is he just so, I want to say, mesmerized, I guess, by her appearance?
He always seems to be a little bit he seems to be ready to believe any beautiful woman that comes to him with a sob story. And I think...
And the problem here is what?
Well, fair. But, and in this case, he's an easy mark. And it's funny, for a con man, he gets conned pretty easily, because it's interesting to think that prior to becoming Remington Steele, she would have been the perfect con. Wealthy socialite, a lot of money, not really anything to do with it. She's worth conservatively $140 million. He would have seen her as a mark, but now he's kind of just buying into the stuff she's shoveling, which is pretty bizarre.
Is he losing his edge as a con man, or is it that as a con man, he thinks that he's so on top of everything con-wise that he couldn't be conned, that he would spot it?
I think it's probably that. And I think that he doesn't spot it if it's a beautiful woman. We've seen this before, and we'll see it again. It's definitely not the first time he gets sucked into something by usually a blonde woman asking for help.
Alicia.
Yeah.
Okay, so they show up at Maxwell's house. They enter, and they're looking around. She's trying to find the report, presumably.
Yeah.
The place is a mess, and Steele finds Maxwell in the bathtub.
Yeah, describes it as soaking.
Mm-hmm.
He's soaking.
I had a question. I would like to know if anybody knows the audition process to be a body in a bathtub.
Yeah. That's a good point. Who got that job?
Mean, what kind of criteria do they have that they're looking for? Great legs, or what is it?
Or was it just like one of the PAs on set that day? They were just, okay, we got to film this. Who do we have? You over there with the coffee. Come on, get your clothes off. You're in the tub. Maybe that's how it works.
I wonder if they would have had to have hired a stunt man to do that because of the dangers of the water.
That's a good point. That is a good... I've never thought about who gets to be the body in the tub, or the body in the morgue, or the body on the road. Like there's always a body somewhere. Sometimes in the trunk of a car. And who gets to be that body? I do think it's interesting as well when she asks him to break in, and he says to her, "Do you have a credit card?" And she says, "My name is my credit card." So he uses her brooch. Obviously they said later on she can't access her trust, so she was clearly just using that as a means of boasting about her wealth. But I just thought it was kind of a funny response to and it's kind of a similar response to what he has. He never carries cash. It's too bulky.
Right.
Right. So
yeah, same notion.
Yeah.
Okay, so then it jumps to the office, and it's everybody seems to be kind of putting their foot in it, I think.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
I mean, here they've got Bishop in there.
Yep.
And he's trying to find out what's going on. And Laura says, he's got one of the finest criminal minds. I mean, and then
Talk
Murphy
about
comes
a Freudian
in.
slip.
And then Murphy comes in. Well, he's put his foot in it again, hasn't he?
Yep. Then sees the congressman.
Mm-hmm. They're not being very careful about, I mean, it's almost to the point where they're in danger of slipping and revealing the secret of Remington Steele.
Yeah.
Or am I reading
also,
that
Laura, no, I think you're right, because they have Murphy making that comment. You've got Laura being furious and not trying to, anybody could have walked in the door. She comes out, she demands to know where he is. She asks Bernice, and I kind of wondered, why would Bernice know if she did know? I get that Bernice is the secretary, but it's not like he updates Bernice on where he is and what he's doing. He doesn't update anybody on that. So
no,
it's kind of weird that she thought Bernice would somehow know. And you're right. Congressman Bishop walks in. She tries to smooth it over, makes that Freudian slip about the finest criminal mind, and then Murphy walks out and also sticks his, at that point you have to wonder how many feet can stick in mouths, because they're all kind of, they're all doing it. They're all putting their foot in it.
Yeah. And then, of course, after he's gone, Laura's trying to figure out where he's at. This is, I think, where she asks Bernice, if she knows where he's at, that you referred to. And her comment, "We're detectives, for heaven's sakes. The least we can do is find the head of our own agency." Well, apparently not. And again, this is one of those things where they're almost on the edge of revealing that he's a fake. But it's also very reminiscent of, where's the bullets for the agency gun?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, they seem to lose track of a lot of stuff for detectives.
He continues.
Maybe they need some of those Apple AirTags.
Yeah, or a little bell. They just need to put like a little bell on him or chip him in some way. Maybe.
Yeah, that's the Apple AirTag,
Yeah, okay. Yeah, they wouldn't have had that technology back then. But.
That's true. That is true. Yeah, I mean, this whole scene is as a result of Steele spouting off his mouth about, it's murder. And Grace, she comes in and says, "What is going on?" He was all fine and normal, and then the press shows up and he goes off the deep end. And who's Margaret Rutherford?
Is she a suspect? I do have a question about this, though, because it seems odd that he would be perfectly fine to say it's an accident. And I get I get it. The press shows up. He wants to be in front of a camera and be over dramatic, but I feel like he would have been over dramatic, period. Like, I don't see any distinction as to if the police were there and they declare it an accident, he's like, "Oh yeah, sure, it's an accident." Then the press show up and he starts calling out murder most foul and whatnot. It feels bizarre that he would flip that quickly. It almost felt like she was not making up that he declared it a murder, because he clearly did, but it felt like she was making up the part where he was agreeing with the police ahead of time. I don't know. It just felt odd that he would just switch that quickly with no rhyme or reason to it. But that could be me. I always thought that was a strange one.
It definitely is strange. Well, we know he likes to spout off and
he does. I have no issue with that.
Statements like that. But yeah, you're right. What is his reasoning for that? I did not look up the movie reference here.
That was actually the name of the movie, Murder Most Foul.
Right. I didn't look that up to see if there was any similarities between that movie and the case that is before us.
Oh, no, I didn't either, and I should have.
So.
Oops. I did look up another one. We'll get there eventually, but there was another one that I looked up that actually watched a YouTube video.
Yeah. It's an Agatha Christie. So
yes, I do know that.
Yeah, there's real quick looking at the Wikipedia. It says that in Murder Most Foul, a barmaid and former actress is found hanged, and her lodger is caught at the scene.
Huh.
I don't see any real similarities between this and the case of Maxwell. So, yeah, you're right. What is the thing that would lead him to go from A to B to Z?
Yeah.
In that quick of a jump? Doesn't make any sense. Other than just he's
a drama queen.
He's Remington Steele. He's expected to make a pronouncement that everything's murder, I guess.
Maybe, yeah. I do want to point out that although Laura has doubts about whether or not it was murder, she also doesn't fall prey to the same sob story that he did when it comes to Grace. She immediately realizes that Grace is attempting to get information about Maxwell's report, leaving her to realize that she's maybe not dismissing Steele entirely at that point, because she can smell something, going back to, I can smell it. She smells bull where Steele completely missed it. And so I think there's part of her that maybe doesn't necessarily believe Steele, but is thinking that, okay, this woman's not telling me everything either, which is something that Steele completely misses.
For all her faults, and we have talked about her faults in the past, Laura is a trained and experienced investigator. And even though she sometimes is oblivious to things when she's not personally and emotionally involved directly. She does seem to pick up on these things, even though in this case she was kind of involved because obviously Steele's making her life miserable. But yeah, she did. You're right. She did pick up on that. And then the scene outside of Steele's apartment, and then inside once they break through the door. First of all,
well, they don't though. She uses her little thing. She won't let Murphy.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's right. Because he says, "For once, I'd like to kick in the door."
Yeah. And then she said, but we'd only have to pay for the repairs.
Yeah. So, but inside, they find his place has been trashed.
Yep.
And of course, Laura connects that with Grace Stanton trying to pump for information about this missing report or perhaps mythical report. Do you think that this is where there is a serious change of heart with regard to Steele and his instincts, where she
for sure
acknowledges that, okay, yeah, you know what? Maybe he does know things. Maybe we should take him a little bit more seriously.
She says that verbatim. She says, we might have to stop apologizing for him and start taking him seriously. And even Murphy agrees. And that's something, right? If Murphy is saying, I think you're right, then and I don't know if she necessarily believes in his instincts so much as that he stumbled onto it again. He seems to do that a lot, where they'll send him on a case or even just not a case where he'll sort of trip over it. And I think that she's realized that whether or not his instincts were instincts or he just tripped over it, he's found something. And she definitely, it's a really good moment for her, actually, when she looks around the room and she sees all the damage and you can see real fear on her face that she's put him in danger.
Yeah. I think, though, that her comment that maybe we should start taking him seriously and stop apologizing to people for him. Yeah. I think that is an indication that even if he just stumbles across a case, that he does have an instinct to recognize that it's a case, which has been the thing that she's been so dismissive about in the past. Well, he just stumbled over it. He just got lucky. Yep. And he stumbled over it, but it wasn't necessarily luck that he realized that there was something going on. It was an instinct.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
I think for her, and you're right, for Murphy too, this is a huge moment that maybe changes their relationship for the rest of the series, or in Murphy's case, for the rest of the first season.
Well, and we are pretty much halfway through, right? So we've got enough evidence of him using his instincts and utilizing those instincts to help solve cases that it makes sense that she's finally starting, the light bulb turns on and she's saying to herself, like you just said, whether or not it was intentional or not, he's found something and we need to actually maybe give him the benefit of the doubt sometimes and take him seriously.
Analyze what he's saying, listen to him before we just dismiss him out of hand. Yeah. Steele getting shanghaied by Swan. Swan is not a likable character.
It's funny. I actually like him a lot. I like him a hell of a lot more than Jennifer Kirk from last week.
Well, that's a low bar.
True.
That's a very low bar.
Yeah, that's fair.
I mean, he's got some sort of charm, but it's kind of a smarmy charm.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a swindler. He's a tax evader. And the thing that kind of, I guess, rubs me the wrong way about him is that as he's describing himself and his relationship to Grace Stanton, he's not a nice guy. He didn't take her on and groom her out of altruistic motives or anything like that. But here he's trying to portray himself as sort of a Henry Higgins to Grace Stanton's Eliza Doolittle. He's trying to paint himself in the best picture possible. And I'm sorry, you're sleazy.
He's creepy. When I say I like him, I don't mean I like him as a person. I mean, I like him as a villain.
Okay. All right. He's a good villain.
I don't want to have tea with him. You used the right word when you said groomed, because
I need to find out more about your husband and what kind of person he is if you're going to like Swan.
No. I don't like him. I think he's a good villain in the sense that you're right. He's sleazy. He's smarmy. He's a tax evader. He's brutal. It's very clear he's a murderer, several times over probably. And like I said, you used the right word when you said he groomed her, because she was a teenager And it just, there's a shudder factor there in and of itself, regardless of whether or not she's a good person, bad person. Like, yeah.
And I'm sure that when he started his relationship with her, it was not a good relationship.
Well, I think he said she was 16, wasn't she?
I don't have my copy of the script in front of me, so
I
can't verify that. But
I
think she said 16, which I think in England is actually legal age.
For not for marriage unless you've got parental consent, as far as I'm aware. And they got married. So my question, and this was a question I had for later, but like, how old was she when they married? Did he wait until she was 18, or did they marry underage? In which case, is her marriage even legal?
Yeah, it would have to have been signed off on by a parent or a guardian at 16 or 17.
Yeah.
Unless she had been emancipated.
Well, or unless they've gone somewhere and married elsewhere, right?
Yeah.
Like you can, where it's not illegal to marry and then come,
right.
Like, we don't know, but if that's the case, it would have been an easy out for her to have been like, oh, no, I was underage, but since they don't use that, I'm going to assume she was 18.
How about Steele negotiating a bribe up from $10,000 to $25,000? I mean, that's pretty clever.
It's clever. Yeah. He knows this is prior to his Sam Spade stuff, so, which we'll get to, but I think he handles this really, really well and showcases all of the things that he is bringing to the table when it comes to the cases that Laura doesn't want him working on. His ability to think on his feet, his ability to assess the situation, to assess people. He figures out immediately, I mean, he's heard of Swan, but he also figures out immediately that telling him he doesn't have the thing is not going to work. Swan is convinced he has it, therefore he needs to play along. And this goes hand in hand with his whole entire personality and persona, which is trying on identities. That's the reason he's Remington Steele. It's the reason he had 5 passports and 5 different names. It's the reason the life of a con man works so well for him, because he assumes a persona, becomes that person for a little while, and then discards it when it no longer suits him. And in this case, he realizes, okay, I need to be somebody who would be willing to barter for this item. I need to be somebody who would be comfortable in this situation, who would understand what the stakes were. I don't need to be Remington Steele right now. And so he just kind of slides right into that.
Now, do you think that negotiating a bribe up from the original offered amount to something higher than that, do you think it was a smart move or risky?
I think it was very smart and very risky. I think it was both.
Okay.
Because, well, I mean, it's smart because it showcases that you're not playing around. You understand what the situation is. It's risky in the sense that if this guy doesn't take you seriously, you're in trouble.
I'm wondering if Swan may have been the type of person who wouldn't have respected a deal if they didn't try to negotiate and dicker.
Dickering for the dingus.
Yeah. I've heard that in some countries, some societies, that if you're doing a business deal and you don't negotiate, you're offending somebody.
Yep. It's actually, I used to work at a private school, and it was an international private school. There were several, I can't count the amount of students that I taught from different places, different nationalities, different cultures. And some were very much, you have to haggle or it's considered rude. Prices are suggestions, and then you go from there. And so I definitely think in this case, he recognized a man who would have been suspicious of him just agreeing right away to that particular price. And incidentally, it's funny that you mentioned that, because we just watched Life of Brian, a Monty Python movie. You know the scene where he's running from the Romans and he stops and he's trying to sell, I can't remember what it is he's trying to get rid of something or buy. No, he's buying something. He wants something to put over his head. And the merchant is like, no, that's not, you have to haggle. I say it's this price, then you offer me something different. He's like, I just want to, I'll pay you whatever you want. He's like, no, that's not how it works. And they go back and forth. Made me think of that.
I think I vaguely recall that. It's been, I did see Life of Brian once, but it's been decades. So, my memory is really short. Steele returns, and I'm a little bit put out with Laura's response, because it's it's somewhat dismissive and demeaning.
Mm-hmm.
He comes back and says, I've had the most incredible night. She says, well, so have I. I've been calling the hospital every 15 minutes and checking morgues. And when he says, well, I'm touched by your concerns, she says, well, why shouldn't I be concerned? You're a very valuable investment. Yep. Oh, is that all he is an investment? Am I reading that wrong, or did you kind of get that too?
Here's how I read it. Oh, I actually had a question before that. How many concussions has he had at this point? Because we should start counting every time he's knocked over the head unconscious. I think this is at least 2, because there was the one in your Steele the One for Me, I think, where he walks in the room and gets knocked over the head.
Well, also the one with the attorney.
Yes.
And the coins.
Yep.
At the hotel out in the middle of nowhere where he walks into a Okay. Yeah. So he's getting bashed about, but maybe he's
at 3. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe his memory is being affected by being bashed on the head all these times.
Concussion watch. It begins.
Yes.
But in regards,
we ought to get a musical tag. Concussion watch. 2022.
I wish we had jingles. That would be amazing to play a little jingle every time there's a concussion. That'd be awesome. I'm not a musician. I can't set that up. But in answer to your question, I actually think this is a cover. Because
you think so?
Well, okay. Consider the scene he walks into. He walks into his apartment. He sees her laying there on his couch, but she's not just laying on his couch. She has a blanket. She obviously knows where the linens are. Either she went into his bedroom and got that blanket off his bed, or she knows his linen closet, knows where he keeps his bedding, etc. But she intended to stay the night. She never planned on going home and making those calls. She was waiting for him to come back. The phone's on top of her. She says she's been calling the morgue and the hospitals every 15 minutes. I think when she says that and he's surprised by it, she realizes she's maybe revealed too much of herself and then covers it by claiming he's a valuable investment. I think she was even more worried than she wanted him to know. And telling him that could potentially leave her exposed. So she kind of just brushes it. Of course you are. You're a very valuable investment. And yeah, I don't think she meant that at all.
Well, I can see what you're saying, but I'm wondering if it wasn't more revealing of at least some portion of her attitude, because like we talked about previously about how you say things when you're drunk. I think also people have a tendency to be a little more unguarded in what they say when they're surprised or they're shocked or something like that. They're taken off guard. And I'm wondering if it couldn't be that as well. I'm not saying you're totally wrong. I'm not saying I totally disagree with you, but I wonder if there's not maybe a little bit more to it than that.
Yeah, I mean, it could be.
Because I think underneath, she's still got this attitude, even though in the scenes a few minutes earlier, she said, well, maybe we better start taking it a little more seriously. There's still this underlying attitude of he's the front man. And I spent a lot of time. He's a major pain, but I'm stuck with him and I got to make this work for the benefit of the agency. I don't know.
It definitely could be both of those things for sure. I will say this though. Finally, the couch is getting used, which is reassuring to me because
Couch Watch 2022.
Couch watch. There we go. More than one. Couch Watch 2022. She slept on it at least, not on the floor where they ended up, in Steele listening to those tapes. At least somebody's sleeping there or sitting there or using the couch. But yeah, no, I definitely think you're right in the sense that she maybe said something that, and I mean, she would see him as an investment in the sense that they've spent a lot of money and time. Speaking of Eliza Doolittling him in the sense that she's dressed him up, made him look the part, made him act the part, made him be this figurehead. So to that regard, losing him would be devastating for the agency.
Yeah.
I do think, though, that there was a bit of a cover for her own feelings, for sure.
So maybe both. Okay. So I'll go with both on it then.
Yeah.
It's just that when I hear that line, it's my first response is, really?
Yeah. Well, true. Yeah. And I think his reaction could have played it off. Maybe he doesn't seem to really even flinch with that statement, which I think it might have been a little bit more interesting if he'd kind of maybe just given her a look as if just an investment. That's how because he's surprised to see her there and so worried. So,
yeah. I would think also at this point that she would be concerned with him starting to act like a shady detective from a pulp fiction novel.
Here we go.
But she doesn't seem to, at this point, she doesn't really seem to pay any attention to it. Why?
I think she just thinks he's being, considering all of the
a drama
parts
queen?
They've played already. Well, the trip to the Devil's Playground, right? He loves to pretend to be other people. And so I think she just kind of rolls her eyes because this is him just being goofy and a drama queen and a bit ridiculous. I cringe once he starts the Sam Spade nonsense. I cringe every time he opens his mouth. It is, secondhand embarrassment. You know what I mean by that term? I feel that every time he opens his mouth. I'm angry, Angel, and I'm not going to play that. I'm like, no, stop. It's so embarrassing to listen to. Please don't do that. Because it just feels like a little kid at their Christmas recital singing so off key it hurts your ears, and I just can't with it,
Yes. I am very well acquainted with secondhand embarrassment. Oh, yes. I get it anytime I watch some of these TV shows and there's a really bad actor or actress on it.
Yeah.
It's painfully obvious that they must have been cast for some reason other than their acting skills because the acting skills aren't there.
Yeah. And he just sounds so silly. He just sounds so ridiculous. And not only that, but it's even worse when Grace calls him out, although she has a tendency throughout this entire episode to be calling out accents and ways of talking because she refers to Congressman Bishop as a side saddle Thoreau, which I really enjoyed. But when she calls him out for his why are you talking so strange? It makes it even worse for me because I'm like, oh God, they've noticed. I don't like it.
And then we have a brief scene back at the office where it's been trashed, and Laura reinforces her earlier statement that maybe Steele knew what he was talking about.
Well, but before we get there, the phone rings. Does he have a phone in his bathroom? When she's checking his head, he's looking in the mirror and she's checking him out. This is still at the apartment, and they're having that moment. Why would you have a phone in your bathroom?
Why not?
I guess.
I mean, that's a silly question. Why not?
It just
hey, it's a high-end penthouse apartment, so they're gonna go over the top with things.
So you can order pizza on the can. Like it's a very strange place for a phone. Who would answer that? Who would ever answer that? You're using the facilities and the phone rings.
Now, think about it. How many people do you know that have phone conversations on their cell phone while sitting on the toilet? I'll bet you know a whole lot more who do that than you want to admit.
Ew, I don't want to think about that because that is gross. Although I have gone into a public bathroom and heard people on the phone in the stalls and just like, no. It just, no.
People do it.
It's gross.
So why couldn't they have done it back then?
I don't want to think of him doing it.
It's just the technology that's different, not the human behavior.
Oh, no. I don't like it. I don't like Sam Spade, and I don't like the bathroom with the phone in it. I don't like it. Anyway, sorry. Bernice is surprised that he's actually found a case.
Yeah, and like I said, Laura reinforces her assessment that maybe they should start taking him more seriously and that maybe he does sometimes know what he's talking about. And she says, scary, isn't it?
Yeah.
And then he shows up at the board meeting where they're trying to ram through the purchase of the property.
Yep.
And he invokes the apes of Madagascar.
Gibraltar.
Gibraltar. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yes. I'm sorry. I was trying to look at my notes, and the only thing that came up to mind was Madagascar, which I think is a totally different movie.
Very different, yeah.
His speech is a bit over the top.
Oh, it's ridiculous.
Would you agree?
It's it enthralls the chair lady.
Oh yeah. Well,
but
it also gives her an excuse to cancel the motion to purchase, because that's really ultimately what she was looking for.
Yeah. Yeah. She didn't want to buy it without the report, which makes sense.
Makes sense. Yeah. But his speech is just, it's over the top.
It's so silly.
Yeah. But it does give her the excuse that she needs to
Yep.
stop the purchase, which is probably a good thing in the long run. And then, of course, after that, there's the discussion with Grace where he doesn't quite solicit a bribe, but what he says could certainly be interpreted as that.
Does kind of. I mean, he says that he was offered $25,000, and if anybody wants to match that, I think that
consider
would
it.
Yeah.
I think he said he'd consider it.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, he's really skating close to the edge, which is a problem both from a legal standpoint, because bribery, soliciting a bribe, that would be considered probably a criminal offense, but it's also a problem for the agency.
Oh, for sure.
Again, we're
ethics.
Yeah, no, it's
But this is all, he's doing this because he's now Sam Spade, right? So he's launched himself into his little persona, and this is where he does his, because I'm angry, Angel, and I'm not going to play the sap for you. And just, oh God, stop. And she's...
And to his credit, he doesn't completely fall for her story.
No.
Until, as you pointed out earlier, she comes on with a sob story.
Yeah. Oh, he's so awful. And I imagine she's right that Swan is terrible and horrible and that she doesn't want to go back to him, but she's also playing Steele like a 10-cent flute.
Yeah. Yes. So you were starting to say something before I
no idea
went on my rant. I'm sorry.
my ADHD brain's already forgotten
it. Okay, so Stanton doesn't quite measure up story-wise until she pulls out the tears.
Yep.
Then they're in the limo. And of course, he's got the trench coat and he's trying to roll cigarettes. And how does Fred not see a huge pile of sharp pieces of broken glass strewn completely across the road?
Yeah, good point. Well, and with the rolling his own cigarettes, first of all, Fred, you're going to have to clean that up. So I would be putting my foot down on that because, and secondly, and here's my question to the larger SteeleWatching community. How common was it to roll your own cigarettes in the 80s? It's fairly common in the UK still. And I know because when I lived there, when we'd go out to the pub or whatever, people would step out for a cigarette and they would roll it themselves. Also, he doesn't smoke. So it's like he smokes the occasional cigar, but we've never seen him with a cigarette other than this bit where it doesn't work. So
yeah, but it's the Sam Spade persona.
Yeah. Well, I just wonder, was he actually planning to smoke it, or was he just planning to sort of put it in his mouth and try to look cool? Which, how times have changed, that would not be considered cool on TV anymore. So,
no. In fact, I'm not even sure they allow that in new television productions. Do they? I don't know.
I think you can use it if it's. I don't think it's not allowed. I just think it's not something that going back to what we were talking about with Etched in Steel, where they created that first scene with Charlotte laying in the satin bed with the cigarette in her hand and stuff, that was considered to be what Hollywood was trying to sell as sexy. I don't think that's considered. We don't see it as sexy anymore, so Hollywood doesn't really see any interest in using it unless it's being used as visual shorthand for this movie is set 30 years ago, or this person's a bad guy, so they have a cigarette in their hand, kind of thing. It's no longer being coded as sexy.
Yeah. Now, as far as the rolling your own cigarettes, I do know that I have known a few people in the past who roll their own cigarettes. And I do remember, and this would have been probably back in the 60s, late 60s, maybe early 70s. I remember there was a company that put out a kit, and it was a mechanical kit. It wasn't to just, okay, here's the paper and here's the tobacco, go to it. It was a kit where it had the paper, it had the filter. You laid it out in this machine. You put the tobacco in it, and then it's like I don't know. You did a credit card type slide thing, and it rolled the cigarette for you.
Now that you've said, my dad had one of those because it was cheaper to buy tobacco from the reserve nearby, the res. So he'd go to the res and get the tobacco, and he'd do the thing, and he'd make his own cigarettes.
Yeah. I don't know how popular it was, but I think that there were probably two classifications of people who did that. One being the more, I don't want to say hick type people, but country folks who tended not to buy things if they could make it themselves.
Yeah.
And it was just, that's how they did it. You go down, you buy a tin of tobacco, you buy some cigarette paper, you roll your own and filters. Well, that's for sissies. And then you had the people who thought it was, then you had the people who thought it was hip and cool to be able to say, I rolled my own cigarette, So
no, my dad was.
I don't think it was. I don't think it was immensely popular to do because it's probably an inconvenience. It's a pain.
Well, especially in a moving car.
Well, yeah, that too. But even not in a moving car, I would imagine it takes a bit of skill, and a lot of people just say, hey, it's not worth it.
Yeah.
Especially at the prices that cigarettes sold for back then. Now, you might be able to make an argument for it, but back then it was like less than $1 a pack,
Yeah, and I remember being sent as a kid to buy them, which is hilarious now, right? I remember because we lived close to the Becker's, which was the variety store nearby, and I would be given the money for it and been told to go and get, and with the phone number, call this number if you don't believe me, sort of thing.
Yeah. That sort of thing. That sort of thing was a lot more common in the past. Couldn't do it now.
Oh God, no.
Huge fines for doing that now.
Yeah.
So anyway, Fred doesn't see the glass.
No.
Okay. I still don't get that. I still don't get that.
No, it makes no sense. None whatsoever. He would have had his eyes on the road. He should have seen. And honestly, would that puncture all 4 tires? Because
I had that in my notes.
Yeah.
Would it have punctured any tires?
Right? That feels really. How bad are your tires? I mean, I've driven over glass and I've never ended up with all 4 tires. Like, I could see spikes, but yeah, that.
And that's what I had, was that perhaps there was something else hidden in it, because glass, I don't think, would puncture a tire, except in very, very rare circumstances. Because like you, I've driven over glass. I've driven over all kinds of things and not gotten punctures. You've driven over some weird stuff that have given me punctures, but glass, usually not.
Even a nail, like you'd have to drive over a lot of nails for the one to get stuck, and then it would have to get stuck and come out of the tire in order to, to do, well, I guess maybe not, but still, like it would have to, it just feels very strange that glass would puncture all of the tires to the point where the limo is useless. Also, here's a question, completely unrelated, but Murphy calls and tells them that he's got the information from the autopsy that showed that he had pond water in his lungs. Wouldn't the police also have had that information? And if so, wouldn't they have deduced that he didn't drown in a bathtub? I mean, I know they obviously wouldn't have been able to say that at the scene, but after the fact, everybody's demanding that Steele publish a retraction or whatever, make a public retraction. Wouldn't the police then later on have to come out and say, oh, no, sorry, our bad, it was murder?
Well, they wouldn't have to. I mean,
well, fair, but I mean,
they can do anything they want. Basically,
Sure.
They don't have to admit that they screwed up, but they would certainly, I would think, continue some sort of an investigation. Of course, the fact that there's a congressman involved changes the entire dynamics of the case.
Yeah.
And you don't know what's going on behind the scenes there that might deter them from looking at it too closely.
Good point. Yeah.
Let's just put it that way.
Also, speaking of Fred, I find it, he doesn't notice the glass on the road, but he notices the car that's following them and they don't. Just kind of interesting. You got Fred paying attention to the fact that they're being tailed, but he doesn't apparently see a whole bunch of glass in front of the car, which is odd.
Yeah. Yes. And then, of course, they they go back to a gas station out in the middle of nowhere to borrow a car from someone who should be giving him the creeps.
Oh, yeah.
And who pretends to be an ignorant hick who wouldn't know what to charge him for a rental vehicle, but then suddenly quotes exact rental fees, $35 a day,
plus
15
gas.
cents a mile. And Steele even references the movie The Big Sleep.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, did he not get anything from that watching that movie? I presume he watched it because he knows how to reference it there. Didn't anybody see that movie?
Yeah,
Fred or Laura or Steele?
Well, it's funny because we've got several movies in this. We've got Murder Most Foul, we've got The Maltese Falcon, and now we've got The Big Sleep. And honestly, I find it a crime that Deliverance wasn't mentioned because he had Deliverance written across his forehead when they pull in there. So just saying.
Was Deliverance before or after Steele?
It was 1972, so yeah.
Okay, so it was before, yes.
It would have been before. And he also comments, Laura, when they're driving the Jeep, he waxes poetic about the Chris Mountain Air, and then Laura says he's going a bit fast, and he mentions that he drove during his Grand Prix days.
Does anybody believe that? I don't.
I don't either. I think this is a Prince Charles reference. I think we should put them in two categories, right? The categories of things that might be true, like his comments about Brixton and his Prince Charles comments, which are completely bogus and designed to throw her off.
Okay. We'll have to have a sting for that too.
Yeah.
And then stop shrieking, Laura. You're affecting my concentration. She wasn't shrieking. She was being very insistent, but not shrieking. I wouldn't think. I wouldn't call it that.
No, I wouldn't say she was shrieking. And she was trying to help him control the car. And it wasn't until, of course, that they have to bail out and they look under the hood that they realize that there's a puncture in the brake fluid container, which is what she notices. And I kind of wonder, he obviously knows something about cars too, because he takes apart the Auburn later on. But
so maybe he did have some Grand Prix days.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, he knows how to take apart and put a car together. So kind of makes you wonder.
Yeah. And of course, then they jump out of the car, and it's one of those, or jump out of the Jeep, excuse me. It's one of those situations where there is no good solution, I don't think, because they're right. If you jump out of the car, you risk getting injured. But if you stay with the car, you risk getting injured. So,
yep. Yep.
I wouldn't want to be in that kind of a position.
No, same. No, thanks.
So they make their way to the Hall of Records and find out that one of the pages from the Platt book has been stolen.
Yeah.
And
Chinatown. And Laura's the one that she says, I've seen that movie. And I had to, because I hadn't seen that one before. So I haven't
either.
And in my notes I wrote, is this where the trope comes from about ripping pages out of phone books? And so then I went and I Googled something like Chinatown page gets ripped out of book, because I was like, okay, I got to see if it's, and sure enough, in the film, I watched like a 35-second YouTube clip. There's a man that goes into a library. It's Jack Nicholson, I think. And he asks, very young Jack Nicholson, he asks to borrow a book. And when he's told this is not a lending library, he asks for a ruler. And then he goes over to the book, uses the ruler to rip the page out. And so obviously that's where, and it's funny because of course, when they point it out to the clerk, his comment about, well, it never happened before that damn movie was really funny.
So everybody knows the movie.
Yes.
Except me.
Yeah, and me. Well, I didn't know it either. So, yeah. But Laura did.
Okay, so then they wind up at Grace Stanton's apartment again. I don't have a lot to say about this conversation. So if you don't have anything to say about it.
He does a Sam Spade again.
Yeah.
Talk, sister. I want answers and I want them fast. I do like her comment about, I apologize for Mr. Steele. Sometimes he forgets who he is. Which is
that is funny. A good line. Which kind of, actually, he doesn't even apparently know who he is, but that's neither here nor there.
But that's pretty much all I had was his cringiness and sometimes he forgets who he is.
And then they go over to Maxwell's house and they're looking for the report. And of course he picks up the key.
Yeah.
And great. Well done, Sherlock. You just ruined any prints that were on there. And then we have the confrontation.
So just one question, though. When they went to Maxwell's house, was that the only reason they were there, to get the key?
I think they were still looking for the report.
Okay.
If I remember correctly. They thought that maybe it was still there.
Okay. It was a very short little scene. And Laura indicates that she's going to use that fake, was it her laundry bill or something, which he says is risky. And she says only if we get caught, which this actually kind of makes me wonder if she's taking a page out of his book with what he did in Steele Belted by pretending that he had evidence that he didn't actually have.
Yeah. That's, I don't want to say it's a tried and true investigative technique, but it is probably more common than one might think. For example, police are allowed to lie to suspects. So, they can lie about the evidence they have, about witnesses they have. They can basically say anything to get the information that they think that person has, or to get a confession or what have you. So this is really just an extension of that, I guess.
Fair enough.
And it's a popular thing in detective shows, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So they fake the report. Yeah. And they gather everybody for the confrontation. And I really like it when Steele kind of points at Swan as a possible suspect. And then he kind of moves over to Vernon because, after all, where Swan is, there's Vernon, and Vernon's his muscle. Yep. And I like Swan's comment about how Vernon isn't the bad guy. He didn't do it. And it's like, well, why? Because he has the only gun in the room. Right. Yeah. Good point.
And again, why does he have the only gun in the room? You're going into a room with a, brutal killer who has a head henchman, whatever you want to call it, with a gun. It might be a good time to find the bullets, or even just bring the gun itself to look like something, because now we should have a "Where's the gun" jingle, because this would have been a good moment to have it.
Yes, it would have definitely. You don't want to go into a situation like that and not have some sort of tool to deal with the situation should it go sideways. Yeah.
Especially if you're pulling what Laura is doing, which is faking that you have the report to begin with. You're going to piss somebody off when it's discovered that you don't have it. So, it's not a terrible idea. I do like how he comments about wondering, why Bishop would get mixed up with someone as distasteful as Swan, and then he says, "No offense, I find you quite charming." And Swan kind of smiles as if he's happy with the compliment, which is probably the only moment in the entire episode where he comes across as anything other than sleazy. It's almost as if he's pleased. "Oh, well, thank you." And then he goes back to being super creepy.
Yeah. And then, of course, they do point out that it was the congressman who did it because he was acting as a front, and it had DDT contamination in the property, and that would not have been good for his political career. And so he had to stop it because he was kind of caught in the situation where he couldn't not let this deal go through.
Right.
But then Steele and Laura let Swan escape. In fact, Steele agrees to give him a head start.
Yeah. Ugh.
Ethics?
I don't like that.
Ethics?
Yeah, definitely.
We've talked before about how Laura in particular has done things that were basically criminal, or agreed to things that were criminal, such as holding onto the evidence in the Palace of Heaven case. Yep. Things that were not only criminal, but from a practical standpoint, maybe I've got those backwards, but it threatens her license.
Yeah.
It threatens her freedom by going to jail. So it's one of those, this is another one of those things where it's like, seriously? Ethics?
I can see, I guess, because we've pointed out that Vernon has the only gun in the room. So I can see him telling him he'll give him a head start, just because you obviously don't want to say, "Okay, well, I'm picking up the phone now and calling the police." "Oh, what's that? You've got a gun." But then the minute he leaves the house, that's when you actually pick up the phone and call the police and say, "Yeah, that guy you're looking for here, he's here. He's headed south on whatever street he's on." You give something. You don't just be like, yeah, well, it was nice to meet you. Thanks for doing business. Have a nice life. Don't kill anybody from now on. Thanks. It just.
But Steele gave him his word, and Steele's word is his bond. So I guess maybe it was the fact that Vernon had the only gun in the room that kind of forced their hands. And once he made the promise, you got to stick to it.
Well, Laura didn't promise anything. She could.
Well, that's true. That's true. That's true.
She could have picked up the phone.
Hey, we found the way to get around this.
Yeah.
There's a word for that. I can't think of it. I'm having a brain fart.
Ethics?
Yeah. So the loophole. That's the loophole in the agreement. There we go.
There it is.
And so then the tag scene where the report finally shows up.
Yeah. I love that it was just a clerical error and it got lost in the mail.
Oh, it was misaddressed.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. That would have been a clerical error by somebody. So yeah, don't they know where I live yet?
Yeah. So. It was good. It was good because the whole episode, you're wondering what did happen to this report, especially because everybody seems to think they have it. And I remember when I first saw it, initially I thought, okay, well, Laura has it. Steele just doesn't realize he has it because it got sent to her and she's the one that, does all the investigating. And then she doesn't have it either. And then you're thinking, well, who has it then? Where did it go? What happened to it? And yeah, just didn't get there. And speaking as someone who has oft been the victim of Canada Post's I don't know if I my whole credit card saga recently it was one of those situations where Costco had switched their credit cards and then mine just didn't get to me. It got returned. And the addition to this saga is that I called, I finally got the card and then they changed the numbers on the cards and reissued them. So therefore they canceled my card and claimed to have sent out another one. Of course, I didn't get that one either.
You never got.
So I called CIBC and I basically said, listen, I want to cancel. This is ridiculous. And so they did. They canceled for me, thankfully. And then the lady on the other end said to me, okay, well, we've canceled your card. We'll be mailing you a cancellation statement. And I said, well, I'm not going to get it. And there was a pause on the phone for 30 seconds and then she laughed and I'm like, I haven't gotten the last 2 cards you sent me. Why am I going to get your cancellation notice? So
that you'll get. The cards you won't.
Yeah. Well, I haven't gotten them yet. So this just felt, very, very, what's the word for it? Validating to see that it was just the mail they screwed up and he didn't get it.
And then of course there's the check from Grace Stanton.
Why does he rip that up? What a moron.
Well, it's post dated for years in advance.
Yeah, still. Well, put it away in your safe.
There's a problem. First of all, from a practical standpoint, that the account might not even exist at that time.
Okay, that's true, but it could.
Well, yeah, it could. There's also the fact that banks don't like to have people walk in with post-dated checks. And if there's any question about the validity of the check, because it was post-dated, somebody associated with the account could say, well, that's, that check's not valid. It was issued X number of years ago and it was post-dated. So, maybe the check is suspicious or whatever. Yeah, you're right. I mean, it could have been worth something someday, but
I just find it very strange. And this is a guy who has never met a finder's fee he doesn't like. Okay.
That's true.
I would think that he would be putting it in the safe and at least making the attempt 5 years down the line.
Yeah, that would be the smart thing. But, the problem with checks also is that if you deposit the money or you deposit the check and you get the money into your account and then it goes through the system and it gets to the other end and the check is either no good or the payment has been stopped on the check, that's always a possibility.
True.
Then you're suddenly, if you've spent any of that money on anything, you're on the hook for all that money that you spent, that you thought you had, money that you thought was yours. And so,
well, I mean, good financial planning would not be spending money until it's in your account.
Right.
Steele obviously is not good with finances. So to be fair.
He's good at spending.
Yeah, he's very good at spending it.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, that's the end of the episode. We have things of interest on the website, which is at www.whitecollaredpc.com. No.
Is it? Is it though?
No.
Is that the one?
It's at www.SteeleWatching.com. I'm sorry. I forgot what I was doing here. Yes, it's been one of those weeks.
Yeah.
So www.SteeleWatching.com. So you'll find the show notes there. You'll find the Amazon links to Murder Most Foul, Maltese Falcon, The Big Sleep, Chinatown, and maybe a few other things.
Deliverance.
As well. Okay. Hang on. Let me add it to the notes.
I'm kidding.
Deliverance. And you'll also find links to the forums that we mentioned at the top of the episode, and a bunch of other stuff, such as
our SteeleWatchers Facebook page, which is where we gather and talk about everything Remington Steele. People share fan fiction. There's pictures, just all sorts of fun stuff going on there. Twitter, Instagram, the Facebook page just for this podcast, all of those places, all the fun stuff.
Yes, all the fun stuff.
All the fun stuff. Join us.
Yes. The next episode will be a good night's Steele.
Lots of firsts in this one. You know, he cooks a dinner. He wears some jeans. Just saying. It's the first time we've seen him in denim.
I think that covers it all.
Yeah, that's the most important part of that episode. We don't need to do it now. Yeah. So just skip right on over it.
Yes. Okay, folks. No episode next release date. Yeah. No, we're done. Yeah. So anyway, be sure and join us for that next episode. And until then, have a good rest of your week, day, month, whatever. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.